my negotiations have always been trying to get freedom, trying to get out from under my bosses so that I can just make what it is that I want and turn it in and have it be something that's not touched, or because front of lobe is always, I descend from exiles. Freedom is the most important thing.
No Free Lunch is presented by T. Rowe Price. The information provided on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified financial and or legal professionals before making any legal or financial decisions or investments. I'm Ndamukong Suh, and welcome to No Free Lunch, where we talk to experts and athletes about how the most successful people in sports manage their money and grow their wealth. As the sports media landscape expands, more and more stable personalities are taking ownership of their IP. As streaming podcasts and YouTube have entered the space, these personalities have all the tools to distribute and monetize their content. This leaves legacy institutions like ESPN or even FS1 at an interesting crossroads. And will they stay at the top spot for years to come? So today I wanted to talk to Dan Le Batard, who since leaving ESPN has built his own media company, Meadowlark. And I'm excited to know the how, why, and his vision for sports media. So let's talk about it right here on No Free Lunch. Today on No Free Lunch, I have an amazing guest that I am excited to continue to learn from, and have been on his episodes and shows many, many times. But he is a 30-year veteran in the sports journalism world and a former host of the ESPN hit show Highly Questionable, and the co-founder of Meadowlark Media. Welcome to the show, Dan Le Batard.
Thank you, sir. It's nice to see your liberations and new projects. It's nice to see you blossoming and growing in ways beyond the huddle.
Yeah, would you ever thought that you would imagine me behind the mic?
A media career would have been unlikely. I wouldn't have picked that for you, but I would have picked up learning from you,
yeah.
and you do like to do that. So it's been, your curiosities are unusual for someone in your position, so it's cool to see what you've embarked on.
No, I appreciate that. But I want to talk to you about the landscape of where media is right now, and primarily just kind of having been in the industry for 30 plus years. And obviously you were at ESPN in a big corporation setting, and you've gone on to your own, and we'll dive into that. But let's first start kind of like, where did you as an individual and a young person, as a kid coming from Cuba, like get into the space?
So my parents are Cuban exiles. That's a little bit different than immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
They had a good life in Cuba, and they fled for political reasons. And at the forefront of everything that they chased in terms of freedom, the way to get to freedom was through work.
Yep.
Through work. You know some of this culturally. I meet a lot of people like me who just, if you want freedom, the way to get to it is work. So I'm not sure that my parents had to teach me a lot beyond that, because I knew in high school what I wanted, and then I went and chased it. And so there wasn't a lot of stumbling around trying to figure out what I wanted. I just knew that whatever it was, I had to work very hard at it. The very beginning of it was a lot of, city council meetings covering sewage, referendums. But eventually it got to some of the stuff that people would enjoy more.
What brought you to wanting to be in front of the camera and taking it to the levels of, you've done an excellent job, and then you obviously gone out on your own from that perspective. But what really wanted you to become that personality and have that voice and be someone that respected? For me, I've always enjoyed speaking with you. It's always been a pleasure. So why did you want to have that voice and personality?
So I started as a writer, and writing is all I ever wanted to do. I wanted to tell the stories of others. Mm-hmm. The stuff that happened in my 30s and 40s sort of happened to me. Okay. I was reluctant to change. I'm not a great changer, but I did know that writing was pretty lonely. It wasn't communal. Yeah. It was painstaking, and there's fulfillment on the back end of hard things. But I wanted to, when I started doing Pardon the Interruption and some of the television shows, what I saw behind the scenes was community. It was shared laughter. And so it was less lonely. And I had been doing that for 10 years, and there were some opportunities that presented themselves. And so more than chasing them, I sort of accepted them. Yeah. And And the radio show that we do or the podcast that we do is sort of born out of the community behind the scenes on Pardon the Interruption, like how they made the show more than the actual making of the show.
Yeah, that's super interesting because would you call yourself an introvert or an extrovert when it comes to that space, especially being a writer and you calling it lonely?
I'm not a performer.
Yep.
I've sort of developed things that make me decent at radio and television. The things I'm good at are expressing myself and storytelling. Like you're just old enough to know that what ESPN sort of did when they didn't have to choose journalism, but they did. And they did at least in part because when they put people like me who had reported for 15 years or so in front of a camera and made them talk about, give us the scope of the story. Don't tell us just about this small part of Ndamukong Suh. Show us his whole life. Show us how he grew up, how he was shaped. Let us make our own determinations on who he is, but tell the accents or provide the accents on the story. The Sports Century series at ESPN and then 30 for 30 became the vehicles where for 20 years, ESPN allowed journalists to take hold of some of the story of athletes. And now when you ask me, where are we now? Well, we're in a time of great chaos. And for you, opportunity. You know how to find opportunity amid chaos. It's a huge disturbance now because ESPN realizes, no, we need to go rent Pat McAfee. We need to go rent Shannon Sharp. Those people don't necessarily need us. We kind of need them now. And so you're in the middle of that crossroads. You're getting out right as that flux starts to shake.
Yeah, and it's super interesting. You mentioned Pat McAfee, you mentioned Shannon Sharp, and I look at myself as nowhere near those guys and maybe an aspiring to them. And really something that you touched on just now was that kind of accepting the opportunity that came to your table, for lack of better words. And I look at myself very similar in the same situation. I had Morning Brew, I had Front Office Sports, and then obviously my partners with New York Times and The Athletic, they put something on my table and said, hey, this is something we think you could be very good at. You're articulate, you have interesting background to you. Should you accept this? I think we could build something special. And I said, it took me about 2-3 years to say, I actually may be comfortable with this. And let me get out of my comfort zone to be able to continue on with that. So how do you envision somebody at this stage of their life and even in your stage who's had tons of experience in the landscape always changing, continuing to build and stay within that chaos and be successful with that chaos?
It's difficult. Self-employment has been difficult. And when I tell you that I'm reluctant to change, ESPN at the end of my career at ESPN, they didn't give me much of a choice on where it is that my principles stood, on whether I could stay there or whether I could leave. So they forced me into entrepreneurship. They gave me a great blessing. They gave me an opportunity. It didn't feel like it at the time. But they provided for me the ability to go out on my own and see if I could compete against the next generation of young people who come to this space understanding that your competitive needs after football are going to need to be fed somewhere in business or somewhere else. So I know that all of you guys have realized, wait a minute, McAfee was the punter. Wait a minute, he can draw an audience because of charisma and personality. I was talking to some of your producers here before it is that we started and a little bit with you about this. The next growth for you in this particular space where you compete with others is where you can get past the sanctity of the locker room to tell simply the stories that are unique to you. They don't have to cross any threshold of getting into the dirty stuff that you wouldn't want anybody to know or see that is the secrets of the sport, but the stuff that's unique to you that only your perspective can have because you're the only one who lived it, beyond the business portions of this, which obviously you're going to be very good at because it's where your curiosities are.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm curious to go back a little bit to the ESPN side of things. And how did the opportunity with Highly Questionable come about?
So I, for a long time, was a very bad client for CAA, Creative Artists Agency, because I was living in Miami and I only wanted to do Miami things. I had an afternoon drive show. I had a column. I was working and doing the Miami stuff on ESPN. And so for 10 years, ESPN needed Latin representation. They didn't really have it. I was seen as the foremost Latin sports journalist. But I wanted something more Miami than what I already had in order to do what they wanted me to do.
Yeah.
And the president of ESPN came to me and said, well, we'll put it on the beach. We'll let you work with your father, and we'll let your brother do the art. My brother was a famous artist internationally and in Miami. And so when they put that in front of me, I'm okay at television. I'm all right. Yeah. I'm not great. I'm not terrible. I don't particularly like or respect television. So we were able to make sort of a mockery of television by putting my father on. It's his second language. He doesn't really know English is his second language, and he didn't know very much about sports. But if you watched it all, you know that he stole the show from me because he was just an authentic human being.
And was that plan for him being such a dynamic part of the show something that you were basically saying, the only way I'm doing this is if I have kind of these comfort pieces alongside me, my brother, my father, these family figures, that what we talked about earlier today was just saying, hey, who in my camp is going to give me the raw truth at all particular point in times to build something special?
Yeah, these were the people. This was speaking the language that was opportunity for me to be able to represent Miami, to be able to do something with my family, to watch my father become somebody who ended up wrestling the television show away from me. Like, he used to be just the accent. He very much became the star of the show, and the thing about the show that was different, because there are plenty of former print guys wearing sports coats on ESPN. Yeah. There was only one person shouting and screaming about whatever LeBron made him feel in his second language. So it was the greatest professional blessing of my life. You and I were talking before about fathers who come from a different time, very coarse with their affection, not very giving of their praise. They made us stronger. And in this particular case, I got to have a better relationship with my father in adulthood on television, closer than the one that I had with him in childhood when, he had his own fears and responsibilities, worried about raising me, and perhaps it wasn't as close as when we were both men.
Yeah, no, that's it's funny how those things come to fruition in life, and how you look at your father or family members, and the more you start to get older and more mature and the characters all come together, like, you find different ways to build those bonds and those different things. So how does that evolve to you transitioning and kind of going out of your own outside of ESPN, and what does that look like now?
So Meadowlark Media was the birth of an intersection of where the gambling dollars are with where independent makers of content are headed in the new streaming age of, it's a democracy now, it's a meritocracy. The audience is going to pick and find whoever it is that they want that's making the good stuff. We've had a 20-year head start where we have been building a podcast for 20 years. So we have one of the successful ones in an industry that's very hard and has a whole lot of people in it because of the size of the head start that we had. We've just been doing it for 20 years. But you can see that the space is evolving, and we're competitive in it, making both the thing that's established, which is the legacy program, and now we're making other podcasts like Pablo Torre Finds Out, and we're making movies, documentaries. And so I never imagined being an entrepreneur. I don't have what you have. Like, you have this insatiably hungry curiosity about business, about the mechanics of business, about the science of business. I've never been driven by that. My negotiations have always been trying to get freedom, trying to get out from under my bosses so that I can just make what it is that I want and turn it in and have it be something that's not touched, or because front of lobe is always, I descend from exiles. Freedom is the most important thing.
Is this probably the most you've felt from a freedom perspective now, going and being independent and having Meadowlark?
Well, you know what's funny about that? It was much safer to be anti-establishment from within the establishment. Okay. You have the safety net of an employer. You have the responsibility for just yourself, and the employer takes care of all of the other people. I am now responsible for the families of 40 people and a corporation that I wish that for it to care about them in a meaningful way. And so in some ways, I have more power in control indisputably by leaps and bounds than I ever have, because I do not have an employer. But am less free in some ways than I would like to be, because I'm responsible for others than just myself. When I was mentioning to you before about only negotiating for freedom, never for dollars, I never got into any of this for money. Whatever your football dreams were, the best of those dreams had a lot of money being made. Newspaper writer, like that was never aspirationally, ambition wise. That's not what I was chasing. So for me, success is really very much in being able to continue to do it, which money requires. But I don't. Business and art are always conflicting, and I prefer to concentrate on art and let others control the business. I don't have an entrepreneurship about me, but our CEO and the co-founder of the company was the president of ESPN when ESPN was making $10 million a day. He was the Disney's biggest profiter, and it was at the time that Disney was doing better than everybody. So ESPN was the big moneymaker, and you'll appreciate this as a businessman. The business model was so perfect that they had between 110 million to 120 million people paying for cable, and 119.5 million weren't watching our show, or paying for it, but not watching it. Because all these shows, First Take, pardon the interruption, some might have better ratings, but we're all infomercials between the games. That's all. Like, they could put anything on there, and you'll see on ESPN2, they're putting just podcasts on there now. Because all that is just programming to get you to when you run through that smoke on Monday night.
So would you say Meadowlark was created off of Highly Questionable and ESPN, the stuff that you did there? And was it a financial aspect that pushed you to go towards that entrepreneur side and really dive into it?
So Meadowlark Media is basically created around what is our legacy podcast, which used to be a radio show. So when I left ESPN, because we left with all of our intellectual property, the next day in a setting like this, right, where we were just building out the studio, we took over our own thing. The audience came with us the very next day. So we were on ESPN the day before, and then the next day, the whole thing comes with us. And now that thing is worth X. We're worth what our inventory is worth. And we had a couple of choices. We could go mainstream media, Sirius XM, and I have to put our fans behind a paywall, or we can try and build the new thing. At the time, McAfee's at FanDuel, DraftKings is competing with FanDuel. Can we create a thing with a gambling partner? They're a startup in content. We're a startup in content. Let's go. And so that's where it started. It originally, I was going to take a more traditional path of just go to the mainstream operator that has done this before. But when DraftKings made an appearance and they wanted to make us make other things for them, but beyond our show, it became a partnership that could be a little bit pioneering and offer permission to people like you who are saying, wait a minute, there's an opening here for something that is just mine. I will make it the way that I want to. I will have my own audience. Can we do this? And so it was to take care of the people around me who have been around me for 20 years, and also to try and build the next pioneering thing as the media landscape totally changes.
So day one, what did it look like for Meadowlark from a financial perspective of that investment going into that business? Because for me, as I look at it, to Morning Brew, Front Office Sports, and the great New York Times and The Athletic, I had a different situation. And you left ESPN. What did day one look like for Meadowlark from a financial perspective?
Well, day one is a funny combination of exhilarating and terrifying, because the circumstances for leaving ESPN, they give us the severance package that will allow me to pay for the next 6 months. But everything after that's a leap of faith. I've got the ability to protect my people with they're not going to make us stay quiet for the next 18 months, which we could have collected all of the money but not done anything anywhere, or we could have started the next day with our own business. So I wasn't ready in any way. I thought I knew some things, but I didn't know. I didn't have nearly enough information. I was too emotional. I was naive. I was hurt and filled with defiance because I'm like, oh, you don't want us? Okay. And I just didn't know anything. And I thought, because to that point in my career, success had been fairly linear, right? It didn't have a lot of down in it, that I would be fine. So the first 6 months, when you asked me day one, what was it like? Well, all right, this is exciting. We get a chance to do it ourselves. Oh no, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And so the first 6 months was just realizing in pieces what the infrastructure was at ESPN that I hadn't noticed before. And next thing I know, I'm sitting in a carved out space at the Clevelander Hotel with leaking pipes and, a roof that's leaking. And I'm like, okay, this is all my responsibility now. It's not, I can't call somebody and just have them come. I've got to go pay a bunch of people, and the pandemic was starting.
Oh, wow.
So, right. So it's not a great time to start a business, and Hollywood is closing down because of everything happening there.
It wasn't a great time in hindsight, or in actuality right then and there from your visual, but it ended up probably being one of the best times to do it during because people are just tuning in. They have nothing else but to do is focus on you.
Well, but that's so much of success. I'm sure you'll learn this more as you talk to business people, and I'm sure you've learned it already. Apply yourself, be available, try your hardest, and then some things that you thought were going to work don't, and some things that you knew were going to fail do, and just keep putting yourself in a position where people on the outside can think you know what you're doing, and it can look like you know what you're doing, but sometimes you don't know what you're doing. The thing that we had, and this is the hardest, it's very easy to say, oh, I stumbled around and now we have success. We had audience and we had financial support. Those are the two hardest things to have. And so we had those things, and we were able to stumble around a little bit.
So how'd you continue to, with those startup costs, that partnership was key to that, but how did you continue to build upon that with sponsorships and things of that nature?
So I built out a company with the help. And when I say I really need to say we, because I don't know business. I know what's in front of the microphone, and I don't know anything else. I've had to do a lot of learning.
It's good to know what you know and know what you don't know so you can find the right person.
Well, how forgiving are you, though, with failure as learning? Because in athletics, you guys have to fail a lot in order to learn. I haven't been comfortable with failure. I've had to get comfortable with failure because all of it is learning. Because I don't have any acumen here, and worse still, I don't have very much interest either, or haven't had very much interest. So I went and hired some folks who started the Players Tribune. Okay. John Skipper was the head of ESPN, and so they built out the framework of a company that would end up having, more than 40 employees and make movies and have a documentary division and unscripted, and so we're just making an assortment of things off of the initial thing, which is the value of leaving ESPN and having the audience with us the very next day. That's a rare thing. Most people can't leave with their stuff.
Yeah, which is very key. And I want to touch on that IP because I think it's very interesting and very, very important for the audience to understand. Because do you find it being sustainable for the networks to be able to license these pre-existing contents and IP from people? Where's your thoughts there?
I've been surprised that the industry seems to have been caught almost totally surprised by something that has been obvious for a while, which is if I keep giving you television and radio at my time when I want, and you have to sit through commercials, or You can have the product on your time whenever you want, and you don't have to listen to the commercials. You're probably going to choose the more convenient route. The old school media got undressed, and Hollywood got undressed by not seeing this wave of change that was coming, and has just completely altered everything. The fact that we do exist for the commercials, you know, like the reason all the content is free is because the commercials pay for the content. So just because the listener and the customer doesn't want the commercials, it wouldn't be allowed to exist if we don't have ways to pay for it. Because the value that we had leaving ESPN is our inventories are inventory. So DraftKings grabs our thing and then they can sell it to other sponsors. And now they have a content business as well. They have money that would have just been marketing dollars that's now marketing and content. And so that's the model that we're building with them. And that's the model that's altering the entirety of the industry.
So something I'm curious to understand a little bit more of Meadowlark, and primarily because I've actually gotten into this space myself just as an individual, and kind of wanting to tell some stories from the documentary side of things. How do you guys envision that continue to grow and blossom within Meadowlark?
We've done a lot of learning on the documentary side, and I would say a lot has changed on the documentary side just in the last 5 years that we've been doing it. Our CEO, until recently, John Skipper, was the one at the forefront with Bill Simmons of the 30 for 30 series. What we want to do with documentaries, because you can make a little bit of money on documentaries, but Hollywood's gotten streamlined enough that there's not the fat that there was in previous days. And so you really got to want to tell the stories. They've got to be stories that mean something to you, because what's happening recently with documentaries and the way the streamers are getting power is they're telling others the story they want told, as opposed to buying the creative, great, unfiltered story that I would want to tell. So, for example, if Ndamukong Suh is making a documentary and he wants, in exchange for his access, to sanitize it, so whatever you think is unpleasant about the Ndamukong Suh story isn't going to appear in the Ndamukong Suh story. Or the documentarian has free access to, for example, I don't know if you saw on HBO Max, they did a Tiger Woods documentary that didn't have Tiger Woods in it, but explored Tiger Woods in a way that was actually interesting and went all the way back to the idea of his father cheated on his mother so much that she buried him in an unmarked grave because she was so betrayed at the end by everything that happened with him and his son. So you're getting the real story, but is that as good as the one Tiger Woods would give you if he gave access to the story? The Hollywood is shifting, so you're more likely to get the story that doesn't have the warts and all in it.
Wow, that's very, very interesting. That's something offline I want to talk to you more about, because it's something, a story that I started in 2014 with my dad. And obviously now that he's passed, it's something that I would love to share, and more so paying homage to him.
What you may have noticed is that these content businesses aren't especially good at making content, and more importantly, they have no earthly idea how to lure young people, because they're all old people in power because they've always been in power. So they have no idea of how to get young people who are totally consuming this stuff in a different way. You and I grew up on ESPN, right? You and I always had ESPN on. My guess is that your kids, that will not be the case for them.
Absolutely not. It's Netflix, it's Amazon, it's YouTube. Like, you're directly into what you want to watch, and that's it. Like, my boys are sitting there like, Dad, why is this commercial here? Like, well, I'm not paying YouTube from this standpoint, and or we'll be on the road in the hotel. Like, you got to wait for the commercial to go through, because that's how they make their money and whatnot. So let's talk about that a little bit more as well. ESPN or FS1, how are they keeping Netflix and Amazon at bay?
Are they? I mean, they're going to try to keep them at bay with live sports, because live sports is, in the modern age, the only thing that America gathers around its television for at an appointed time. There is no, and football is God among the gods. But live sports, the reason all of them have popped up and grabbed at live sports, Amazon, Netflix, the Peacock, they're all trying to get to live sports, because it's the last place where you don't want to be 3 hours behind on this. You can't catch up on this the next morning. You've got to watch it right now, and you'll sit on commercials if you're on network television in order to do it, because this one thing matters more than anything else in entertainment. For the moment, Fox and ESPN have a head start there, but the other entities have an amount of money that has an ability to catch up. I mean, Disney should stay out in front. They've got plenty of money and the head start, but I don't need to explain to you the seismic tectonic shift of change at ESPN. Just ESPN right now, where they're going a different way, where it's the last 20 years of going with the journalists isn't what they're going to do. They're going to have to go grab Rich Eisen and license his show, grab McAfee, grab Mina Kimes and her podcast, and do all that stuff to see if they can find ways to get the young people.
And they're looking at, if I'm not mistaken, trying to grab up NFL Network and some of these different particular pieces. Is that part of their strategy of creating that moat?
Yes. I mean, of course, they can buy the biggest thing. I would think that all of them would be competing for as much NFL as they could possibly have, and ESPN would have a sizable advantage there over the others. But everything else is just chum in the water. Live sports is where that's at. Yeah. And so you'll keep your advantage for the near term with live sports until the day when the rights fees become so astronomical that the leagues go bankrupt because they can no longer afford to pay you guys.
Talking about talent, we mentioned Pat McAfee and Shannon Sharp and folks of that nature. Let's talk a little bit about Bill Simmons, somebody that I have a ton of respect for, and Conan O'Brien from that perspective, and them leaving the big networks themselves. Like, how does that independent model remain sustainable for them? Why or why not?
I've heard those guys interviewed too, and not unlike me, they were sort of pushed into that position, right? Simmons by the guy who is now the CEO of my company, Conan O'Brien, because he lost out on everything that was late night television and the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. And I don't think originally he got to have his IP, but now he has his IP. And so when you have your IP, you can sell it to satellite or license it to satellite XM or in Bill's case, Spotify. And those guys have the advantage of being almost first to what it is that they were doing and building it out very strongly from there. For example, Conan right now, as we speak, is better equipped to teach Stephen Colbert what it is that he needs to know about the favor that CBS just did for him, not only giving him 10 months to prepare for his exit, but to have those 10 months on network television while telling people, hey, in 10 months and 1 day, I'm going to be over here. Come find me. Because people will find Ndamukong Suh if they're a fan of Ndamukong Suh.
Yeah, so I've got two questions because this conversation has been amazing, but I want to respect your time. What advice would you give me as I'm building and growing and understanding in my curious business mind from that perspective as I'm driving into this media space?
So I would be meticulously careful about the things that you care about, and then stretch yourself consciously to be more open here. Yeah. Like your producer's prodding the best and most adult you as you come into midlife, come into a new career, perhaps show vulnerability in a way that has human connection to your audience who might just see you
as this big, tough grizzly bear.
And big, tough guy over here, but also savagely responsible business person over here. But where are the things that his teammates might say about where it is that he was fun or softer or lighter or surprising, so that your podcast is not just a place that people can learn, but they can connect to you in a very human way? I don't know at this point where you are in the video and audio portion of this, but I would say audio specifically is so intimate that you want to reveal more of yourself to people, not beyond your discomforts where your principles lie, but perhaps beyond your discomforts where they've been because you've had to be cautious for 18 years because you don't ever want to be the one bringing headlines into your huddle.
And it's so interesting that you say it and present it in that manner, because being in the sports industry and being interviewed 2, 3, 4 times a week, depending on how big the game is or whatever it may be, you have this shield that is like nobody can pierce it unless I really, really trust you. And there's very few people, especially in the beat writers or people that are national televised, that you would actually let behind that shield, for lack of a better word. So you're basically telling me, open up that shield, be vulnerable, and let the people really see you. And
but calculated, but calculated.
100%.
Only revealing in the ways that offer your ability to speak on a subject an expertise that literally no one else but you in the world has to offer. Surely in business, you're good at maximizing inefficiencies and efficiencies. Yeah. The thing that you have that no one else at microphones have, when everyone can put on 2 microphones, is that your experience is the one that is unlike anybody else's. And so if you're calculated about how you're revelatory, because I know you're cautious about this, and I get why you're cautious about this, but there's a whole space for you here of growth for both this business and for yourself, where you reveal just a little more of yourself, and that'll grab your audience. It can be strategic, calculated, and charming because it's just human. It's not, it doesn't have to be, you couldn't even do it inauthentically. You wouldn't, for sure. You couldn't, you're not capable of doing it inauthentically. But if there are 10 stories you've got that no one else has, that you can tell, that don't betray any confidences, but spike for you because, and Ndamukong's got that podcast. It's about what? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm interested in him because I like him for this reason. But he was talking to Warren Buffett about what? So then now you're just casting a wider net on how to be a personality, when I don't think you totally want to be a personality, but you'd like the work to, you'd like the knowledge to sort of speak for you and to build out the platform that allows it.
Yeah, 100%. I hear you loud and clear. So I got one last one for you because this has been amazing. What is the biggest price you've ever paid for a breakthrough?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I had to watch my little brother die.
Wow.
By his bed for 10 months, might as well have been my son because I don't have kids and I sort of had to raise him. And so I have gotten to a place going through the 2 years of grief instead of around it, because he was a really vibrant personality, and the watching of him die next to his bed when he's a prideful person and it takes 3 people to help him go to the bathroom, and his will to want to be here made it so that the pain was the most excruciating I've ever known by leaps and bounds. But my gratitude for living since then, and since the horrific pain of being on my hands and knees after his death, I can't help but be grateful for it. You probably, I don't know whether you have stories that run that deep, but you can probably tell me any number of stories where going through the pain ended up in the growth you needed.
Man, I almost want to cry with you right now because I honestly went through that with my dad. Like, just to sit there and see him, again, wanting to be there so strong to be there for your family and whatnot. But yeah, that's a tough one, man. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate who you've always been, and I look forward to seeing the next chapter of this. You're insatiable in terms of chasing the things that you want. So I suspect you'll grab all the things you want.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. This is a pleasure.
Likewise.
T. Rowe Price proudly sponsors No Free Lunch. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the podcast participants and do not necessarily reflect those of T. Rowe Price. Their sponsorship supports the platform and does not imply endorsement of specific content or perspectives. I think my biggest takeaway from Dan Le Batard's conversation comes in multiple lenses. But I think the key piece that I want to latch onto is freedom. And not financial freedom, but more so the freedom to share his art and wisdom of telling stories your way And where it hits home for me is the unbiased, unfiltered focus of his stories and being able to have these open conversations that he's in full control of, but then let alone the staff that was with him at ESPN that he was able to take from highly questionable, built something special and has continued to build something even more special outside of that big corporation. And he takes on that weight, which he doesn't want to, but has the pride to carry on and really say, I have the freedom to not only be successful and build what I want to build, but I also have the responsibility of all these other great people that have helped me build this. That's our show. Like, comment, subscribe to our show, No Free Lunch.